actually doing field training, you're taking that person and showing them real life events. And to me, that is the crux of training somebody on how to operate in an EMS system, because it, we can't duplicate that in a training setting. You can't duplicate real life scenarios, real life things that I talk about in a class. I can tell you all day long what it's like to breathe for somebody that's not breathing versus somebody that is breathing with a bag valve mask until you do it.
Right.
And then that field training officer is the person who is responsible for helping that person figure that moment out.
The views expressed on EMS In and Out are solely those of the hosts and do not represent any affiliate agencies or employers. This podcast is for educational discussion only. Always follow your local protocols and consult your medical direction when applying any clinical practices discussed. Hello and welcome back to EMS In and Out. We're so happy that you've joined us. Hopefully you just listened to the BVM episode from last week. I think we may have ruffled some feathers. I hope so, because I believe Rob Moyers and I, who is my co-host. Hi, Rob.
Hello, everybody.
If you listen to that episode, and if you haven't, please go back and listen to it. I think we make some good points and, and talk about how important it is to know how to use a BVM properly. Now, mind you, you're not getting the actual training. It's just, an episode that helps you critically think. Above and beyond that, of course, we want you to watch all of our old episodes. Please go back and do that. If you don't know where to find those episodes, we have a landing page now. I'm going to do a screen share on what the landing page looks like and talk you guys through it. So this is our landing page. I'll put it in the notes of the show notes. The actual link will be there. So here's where all the episodes will start building. We've got 4 episodes. This will be episode 5, and of course we have the introductory one. So there'll be about 6 on here. Another thing too, this actually shows you different places. You can just click on this and go directly to Apple Podcasts. So you can actually, wherever you are listening in your favorite place to listen, you can click on these icons and go there, or you can watch it directly from this site as well. You can just click on the episode and it just comes up in full view. Another thing I want to point.
Eyes closed.
What's that? Yeah.
I'm sorry. They got me eyes closed. That's a really terrible one.
They got you with your eyes closed on that one. Yeah. It's just, and right now, the platform that we use to record on, Riverside, it's a great platform. This is a new feature. So one of the things I'm going to ask them to do is allow us to put a thumbnail so that these thumbnails will match the YouTube thumbnails. So that's going to be a feature that I ask of them to do later. Another thing that's really cool about this, if you want to hear about, our about page, this is kind of how we got started and what it's all about. But another great thing is it's got its own subscribe button. So I'm thinking, Rob, that we may do something special for this as we get subscribers on here. This would be different than the subscribers on YouTube. I wish they were linked up, and maybe someday they will be. But right now, I think what we could do, and I'm just throwing this out for the first time for your ears to hear, and it just hit my brain a little bit ago, is if we get people subscribing to this page, which is still our podcast, maybe it's something where we can offer them a day early recording of the episode so they can get it a whole day early to help people do that. So that's something to look forward to. We'll start planning that out. If you're watching this right now and you can go and subscribe, go ahead. We don't have any subscribers yet on our landing page. We've got some on YouTube, but this will be different. I'm very interested in how we can work this out going forward with Riverside. And I think Riverside has bigger plans for this subscribe button. So once again, newer platform when it comes to recording podcasts, definitely a newer platform when it comes to hosting podcasts. So, we're kind of growing along with them. So I wanted to make sure everybody saw that and knew how to get to it. Once again, that link will be in there. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share at any other place, wherever your favorite listening place is. If you're YouTube, please subscribe at YouTube. Please hit the bell to get notifications when we launch a new one. Of course, YouTube's have all of our shorts, which are are getting a lot of popularity right now. We're having some really good traction with our shorts because those are just those small sections out of our conversation that catch people's eyes and maybe even teach something in a small amount. So how are you today, Rob?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. I'm doing good. A
Yeah.
little crazy day, but like
Mhm.
you said a minute ago, right before we hit record, it's the first time we've recorded in the daytime. You see, Rob's got some light behind him there. Normally, it's darker or
Yeah,
so.
right.
But I look the same because I'm in my studio, of course. But yeah, it is definitely light outside. But today's topic is one that we boiled down. We've got a list of topics we want to go through, and this one we boiled down because it's a little timely. And when I presented this to Rob to talk about it, he mentioned that he was kind of going through the same process with his department. So it is going to be about the FTO, so that field training officer, that new employee, whether that's the green medic or EMT, even to the new, like not so green EMTs and medics who may be
Yeah.
just working for the new to the systems, but they've got experience. So there's different nuances with all of that, and we're gonna have a discussion about the importance of the FTO and that new hire process. So,
Yeah.
Rob, why don't you take it away? Kind of share with me what you're able to share and want to share about how important the FTO position is in any department.
Sure. Yeah. And I want to make sure that I'm not talking about my department because,
Same, same.
obviously, we're it's Kyle and Rob, like we're having
Right.
this conversation. So, as a instructor of EMT, as an instructor with my division and new hires, the FTO becomes such a crucial part of the training of new people, regardless of where they come from. They could be a brand new person. Like, my department will take a civilian and train them in EMT, but they still have to go through the process. We also have the ability to have schools, like, from my area, that will send people to do ride time with us. The FTO, in my mind, is the person who teaches critical thinking on the fly. So I can teach somebody in a setting of, I have a mannequin in front of me, great. And we can talk about, one breath every 6 seconds, and how do you actually, breathe for somebody, but that's on a mannequin. When you're actually doing field training, you're taking that person and showing them real life events. And to me, that is the crux of training somebody on how to operate in an EMS system, because it- we can't duplicate that in a training setting. You can't duplicate real life, scenarios, real life things that I talk about in a class. I can tell you all day long what it's like to breathe for somebody that's not breathing versus somebody that is breathing with a bag valve mask until you do it.
Right.
And then that field training officer is the person who is responsible for helping that person figure that moment out.
Right.
Right. So in a setting where you really want somebody to be able to learn from the setting that they're in, the field training officer is the most important person in that training line of getting that person ready for being on their own.
Right.
Right. Right.
And I've always go back on this adage, and I'm part of, I've done marketing before. I've been a part of different, type of jobs that have marketing involved. And one thing that one of my marketing gurus taught me was he always said something about everything is in the name. So the EMS in and out, it's in the name. It's inside of a city, it's outside of a city. It's the ins and outs of our profession. And
Right.
it's the same thing when it comes to FTO. Field, in the field training officer. If it wasn't supposed to be, and that's why I'm saying this now, because you said something that sparked my comment on this, is that, and I never looked at it that way. So and this is a really good eye opener for me. I'm not a field training officer myself. However, I do train some new employees on specific topics like high performance CPR, pediatric CPAP, CPAP in general. So I'm kind of one of the people that they ask to train new people because of my educator position. Just the other day, there was some new employees that we had, and we had our trauma session, and so they just joined in and they were part of it. So they got to see what we do for continuing ed, but we also kind of dabbled into this new employee training as well. But that field training officer is is really where it lies. It's training them how to be in the field. And that doesn't even always mean on the truck. The field is also in your building, to train them the ways of that building, the ways of that crew, the ways of that department, meaning this is how you clock in, all of that kind of stuff. These are the
Yes.
nuances. This is when you want to take vacation. This is when you want to take PTO. This is when you want to take, personal time. Like all of those, that's still part of, yes, it's all the hands-on stuff like you talked about, but it's also that onboarding of how to be in the culture that we're building for that department per se.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the FTO needs to work with the education department hand in hand. Like
Right.
it needs to be a handoff, like a baton.
Yeah.
Because, like for example, I can teach somebody how to be an EMT per the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my job is to teach new skills. So it's kind of funny, talking back to the last podcast with the BVM. Watching somebody learn how to use a BVM for the first time is kind of it's kind of comical because it's an awkward thing, right? But then understanding when to use it and when to use it in your setting and the department that you work for, there is this kind of like blend versus like it's a joint community of things. It's a joint community of like education in a building and then the education in the field
Mm-hmm.
of how to take that information and use it in real life
Right.
with critical thinking, with the ability to understand what are your protocols,
Right.
when do you use this stuff, and we rely on our FTOs heavily to tell us, hey, listen, was your training good? Are they coming out trained?
Right.
Where do we start in this
Yeah.
situation? It's not like the FTOs aren't the ones that are teaching the beginnings of things. They're the ones that are teaching them how to apply
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge that we are instructing them, initially.
Right. And it's one of those things too where it's preparation, it's also proficiency. Like part of the FTO program that I've seen when because I've seen FTOs do their thing.
Mm.
I've come to stations before and the FTO may say, "Hey Kyle, can you expand on this topic because we know it's your wheelhouse and we want them to hear your point of view on this." And I'll go into a training moment with that, that person that's in FTO. But it's also proficiency. Like we keep a folder. There is a path. It's a true onboarding. We
Mhm.
didn't used to always have that, and now we do. We have someone that oversees it directly as an administrating position, which I think is great. And it's we're always trying to improve it. I mean, I'm sure you guys are too.
Yes.
Everybody's trying to improve the FTO, but this is a profession where the FTO is still kind of at its infancy, in my opinion. You go to a police officer, first responder, and they've had they do a whole year of FTO,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they are actual training officers for a longer period of time when they're actually not even like released to the truck yet per se. They're already released to the truck, I should say. So or the
Yeah.
car, whatever. But and I don't know how fire departments do it, how they do an FTO program. I kind of see it as a potential starting point for mentorship programs, which is another thing. I mean, we can talk about too. I think all of us in the EMS world, especially EMS, we need to find a senior person to and force it. It just comes naturally. Is find someone that can be your mentor, not only in the world of what to do on scene, but how to live the culture, how to live with your family, how a mentor that you can go to and talk about mental health, talk about family matters, talk about the life inside the building with your crew, talk about,
Mm.
have that guidance because, so often if you don't have a mentor, and I would suggest everybody, search for a mentor, someone that you're comfortable with. I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not having a mentor. I personally have a mentor. I thought she was my mentor for a while. And then I finally asked her one day, I'm like, listen, I really feel that this is a mentorship program. And will you be my official mentor where we have a quarterly meeting and we talk and we reach out to one another and then I want to mentor someone eventually. I'm not sure who that is yet, but it's
Right.
just one of those things. Talk a little bit about what you guys and what your feelings are about the mentorship program that kind of goes in line with the FTO stuff.
So I think a good FTO, somebody will come in and they will connect with a instructor whether it's somebody in headquarters, somebody that's an FTO, there's always somebody that you'll connect with if that person is genuine in what they're trying to do and really wants to teach. You'll find somebody that you connect with. And that is a big part of being an FTO, because you might not be done being their FTO when they get released. They may reach out to you or be on your shift and be like, "Hey, I had this call and, I'm excited and, this happened and I want to run it by you." Like, for example, if I train something in our headquarters, people will come to me and say, "I want more training," or, "Hey, listen, I had this experience." And I think you touched on it in a previous episode where you were so proud of
Mm-hmm.
somebody talking about, I
Yeah.
think it was pediatric CPAP.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just
Exactly.
like, yes, you were listening. Like,
Yeah.
you were doing the thing that I wanted.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pushing these things out. And I think a true FTO doesn't look at it as a job. I think they look at it as, this is what I am. I am somebody who is trying to create another version of myself, or another version of what maybe I think that I am in this
Mhm.
department, or maybe what I would like somebody to be that I would like to work with in 5 years. Because you might work with this person, and if they're not doing great, you were their FTO.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. Who was their FTO? Oh, we've
yes,
heard
of
that.
course.
There's been a few that who was their FTO? Okay. But
Yeah,
when it comes to like, maybe people are listening to this that don't have an FTO program right now.
yeah.
What would you give as advice? I'm not sure what part that you uh, took in the development of your FTO program, or if your place has always had FTO. I'm not sure. Ours always had a loose interpretation of FTO.
Mhm.
And when I came on, there was no such thing as, I mean, 20 years ago, there was no FTO. You literally just showed up on the truck, and your FTOs were your partners. And they weren't even, they were just, you were drinking from the fire hose per se. So
Yeah.
talk about, like, if you remember the time when FTOs became important, like, talk to somebody, that may not have an FTO program, and how important it is to have that.
So I've always had, so since I was hired in 2003, which
Mhm.
we call the aughts, the old people. um, Uh, I've always known an FTO, and it helps the people that are training people to become their the department's new hires or whatever, as feedback to the education department, the people that are in charge of academies, the people that are in charge of hiring, firing, all the white shirts. We have to have a standard. So the standard is pushed through the FTO. So, understanding rules and regs, protocol, that kind of stuff, putting them with somebody who is knowledgeable with that kind of stuff is super important. The first few months, I would say 6 months in my department, because we run 100,000 calls a year, right? So the first 6 months, you're going to get a lot of repetition. You're going to get a lot of what do you do in the morning when you come in? You're checking your equipment, all this stuff. When you set a standard and an example, and this is what you're supposed to do, that new person will follow that. Or if you don't do those things, that person will follow that. So understanding the limitations of somebody like me in the instructor role, I think, honestly, the FTO is more important in the long run than their initial instructor, because we can only do so much. I'm not there with them. I can show somebody how to write a run report. I'm not there showing them how to write a run report
Right.
in cardiac arrest,
Right.
or a massive trauma, or like a frank breech delivery. Like all of those things. When you talk about understanding critical thinking, and you talk about understanding the actual job, the field training officer is more important than the instructor that they came out of. So for a department that doesn't have an FTO, I would say you probably need to look at your people that are and do a deep dive. Do a deep dive on report writing. Are people coming into work? Are people doing these things on the truck that are necessary for the division to do well and to flourish? And then you start looking at what are their interpersonal skills? Like, are they very good at teaching? Do they want to teach? Like, there's all these little things that have to come about for you to develop an FTO program, let alone maintain one.
Right.
So my thought would be, like, what do you want out of an FTO? For our FTOs, they have several jobs, whether it's us or another school, like another EMT paramedic school, or Cleveland Fire that comes through our EMT class. There's so many different things that they are responsible for, and I'm impressed by our FTOs because they at any given day they can just have a person. So I remember times where I'd come into work and we'd have a potential doctor fellow riding with us. I'm like, okay, well, here we go. Like, this
Yeah.
is my day. Like,
Right.
and I didn't even know about it. And it's like, all right, well, I have somebody that I need to talk to about what I do today.
Right.
And, it puts you in a mindset. If you're not willing to accept that mindset, then you need to probably question yourself as, like, what are you doing here in this job as an FTO?
Yeah.
So you need to be an educator
Mhm.
as an extension of education, but also, like, you're different because you're in the field. You're doing it live,
Right.
right? That's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and it kind of, the beginning part of this talk it seems like we're talking about that brand new, fresh EMT or paramedic out of school, the green, the rookie, the
Yeah.
boot, whatever you want to call them. I don't know, different places call them different things. But what about that seasoned medic? That person who, like, let's say I decide to, go and work for a new department, and here I come in. Like, what do you feel that the role is of that person who's already been FTO'd maybe someplace else or not, but they have
Mm.
the experience, maybe they have the years. Like, where is that fine line when it comes to that person being in an FTO program?
In my experience, they're even more important than me because they've already been trained.
Right.
The question then is, again, whatever department you're in, you kind of work within that department, within
Right.
those rules, within that setting, where, depending on where you're going. So they now have to take somebody who is seasoned, and who knows what kind of habits they have. Maybe they were trained terribly. Maybe they're awesome and they come in and they're thinking, I don't need anybody to train me. And it's like, well, maybe you do because you've never worked for our department.
Right.
So FTOs are even more valuable in that situation where they take somebody and almost reboot them. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch. Like, you have to shake an Etch-a-Sketch and then say, okay, well, listen, let's start fresh. Let's work on your positives,
Yeah.
and let's get rid of the negatives, and, like, this is how we operate in blah 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 land, right?
Something that sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but something you said before we hit record today, you said something along the lines of the system and the recording system that catches these one-liners that,
Yeah.
like the BVM doesn't stand for basic ventilator maneuver. I just got
Right.
this episode's one-liner. They're like an Etch-a-Sketch. So I
Yeah.
want to go out and get a bunch of small little Etch-a-Sketch, like keychains, and give them to the seasoned new employees.
Yeah. And it's funny because I teach both, and like I teach new people, and that's one way to teach. There's another way to teach when people come from, and there's a thing called lateral transfer. That's a
Sure.
big deal, right?
Sure.
So when you get a lateral transfer, that's great. You think that they get the experience, and you're coming in and they can just hit the ground running. Maybe not.
Yeah. And
Maybe.
it's one of those things where, and I've had some of those lateral transfer type of new people, and they'll say, well, we didn't do it that way at my old department. I'm like, okay, well, I'm happy that you don't did it that way, but this is the way we're doing it. This is the way that our department expects it to happen. And I don't have any specifics, and it's not
Yeah.
meant to be rude, but it's just supposed to, they have to still understand that, I've worked at 11 different hospitals in my career. Every single hospital had a little bit different way of doing something.
Yeah.
One hospital let me just pretty much do anything I wanted to in the ER as a respiratory therapist, and then go back and tell the doctor what I did, right? Within reason. I couldn't intubate by myself, but I could start people on therapy and start them on things and use my clinical background. We had the he's like, I'll never forget it because I did work in a hospital that was a Mother May I system. Hey, can I go
Mhm.
do this? Can I go change the vent? Can I do this? And then, you work for a hospital that says, okay, here's some protocols, and you need to do your job, and you need to do what you were trained for underneath these protocols. If it's outside of the protocol, then you consult. But then once you're done starting that, then then come and tell me, and let me know what you did. So, every place is different. You have to learn a new situation no matter where you go, whether you're brand new and green, or whether you came from another department that was, and we don't know what that department's training was like. It could have been all online
Sure.
computer training for all we know. We've got to get them
Sure.
used to our training, our process. Their FTO, especially if they're an older medic that's coming in, they probably didn't even know what FTO was 25 years ago. So we have people sometimes that retire from jobs and then come and work for us, and they've already had a career at the whole thing, and they're
Right.
very, you want that person to be looking down at you if you need help, because they're going to save your life. But there's certain things that the FTO program is supposed to help them. Like I said before, it's not just about the patient care. It's the business that your department is dealing with, and their intricacies that you have to deal with in the FTO process.
Sure. And I could even like talk about equipment. So you get somebody that comes from another department
Oh
that
yeah, and they're
used
using
a
a
different
McGrath and
monitor,
not a guide scope.
right? They were Life Pack, and
Yeah,
and then you
and
have
now there's
Zoll.
Zoll. Yeah, and you're like, oh,
Capnography.
yeah,
Just something as simple as capnography, the process of doing it from one device to another.
yep,
And then they come in and like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. But then it's like, well, do you know how to do it on this device?
right,
Versus, Hamilton versus Lowell Vents.
right,
There's all these different things. It's way different than showing somebody something for the first time
yeah,
versus again, like we become creatures of habit. So that's where the FTO comes in my point of view. You show somebody how to develop good habits,
hmm,
right? And looking back at our assessment podcast we talked about, when you're fresh, you don't have these ideas of how do I run a call? What are my you know what pathway am I going? Like what step do I hit first? And when you don't know that, you better fall back on ABCs, especially with a critical patient. This kind of a thing in your teaching. But then once you get to the field, you actually develop a way to do that in your own style, right? And that's where the FTO can come in because, quite frankly, I see a lot of people mocking or developing their style after their FTO. So the FTO in that point is very critical in helping people develop their own style of working with the teaching that they got from the education department. So again, it's like passing the baton. I can show somebody how to do an assessment, but when you're doing an assessment in real life and you have six people on scene and you have to delegate at some point, that's where the FTO becomes a critical part in that training where you're like, okay, now we're out of there's no mannequin. It's not rubber and plastic in front of us. We have a live patient. What are you going to do?
right,
And I had a great FTO who would just be like, okay, this is the complaint. What do you want to do? And the first couple times I'm like, I don't know. We're going to do everything because I have no idea what's going on. They could be dying, they could be fine or whatever. And then you pick up those little things as you go through your job, especially if you're lucky enough to have a lot of calls
right,
that you can reference and say, okay, I remember something from this last call, and I was put in a position to critically think by my FTO being that safety net.
yeah,
Right, because if you mess up as a new person, well, now you have somebody under you saying, okay, well, I'm not going to let this person die, but
right.
I'm going to let you maybe, rise to the occasion, maybe fail, maybe think about things. And then what's most important is discuss it after the call.
Yeah, yeah.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah, exactly. And and quite frankly, yes, we have people that are labeled FTO, and they get a stipend, they get a certain dollar amount above and beyond. I'm not sure if it's across the board with you guys. I don't know exactly how we do it with us either because I'm not an FTO right now. I may be one in the future, just because of how things would work out. I did a lot of onboarding of people in the respiratory therapy. I was one of the preceptors, is what they called it in the hospital, not
Mm,
FTO. So
yeah.
I do have some precepting, behind me, and for the hospital level. And quite frankly, what's your thought process on everybody's an FTO in some aspect, especially once they get cut from the FTO, the actual official FTO? What's your thoughts on the rest of the crew that may be working with them after they're released to do things on their own? What kind of responsibility does everybody in the department have to make sure that these people continue? Because you're not going to be able to have every situation or every
Right.
scenario pop up, whether that be clerical stuff, whether that be, house chores. Like, you're not going to have everything pop up the very first time you FTO somebody, or even the first year that someone is an FTO. What's your thought process on, you know, other people that may be listening to this that aren't FTOs, but they have the new person. They have the person that's gonna be cut from the FTO program, because not every FTO is gonna be their partner when they're loose. At least that's the way we do it. They spend time with
Yeah.
their FTO, and then they go to their station that they're assigned to, and then those people are their crew, but may not have been their FTO. What's the responsibility of us who are part of the system, but aren't officially FTOs? What are you thinking about on that side of things that you'd want people to hear?
I think that, when you have 100% buy-in, or, you have the majority that are buying into an idea of what you want your system to be, that's the ultimate goal, right? And then you have a group of those people that are trained or are, looking at doing the actual training stuff. But again, when a person comes out and they're working for the first time after their field training stuff, and they get signed off to go, and then you start hearing, what's wrong with this person, like, where in that process of training was that ever addressed? You know what I mean? So you can never encounter every single situation. Like, sometimes, hey, listen, if you have a 6-month field training thing and you never have a cardiac arrest,
Right.
that's not the FTO's fault, right? So at the end of the day, maybe take that time, if you have downtime, to maybe go over some stuff and run some scenarios. Like, you have carte blanche as an FTO to also run scenarios, because for our department, FTOs are also our kind of assistant instructors. So whenever we have a large class that's going on, and we have the ability to pull them in on overtime, kind of a thing, they work hand in hand with us, and we have an idea. Look, we're training this today, and their situation is, okay, I'm going to man a station. I'm going to do a lab station, right? Well, now you can do the same thing in the field. If you have downtime, let's look at our equipment. Let's go over some stuff. Let's run some scenarios, right? So then maybe they don't get a cardiac arrest, or maybe they don't get a vent patient, but you can sit there, if you have the time, to go over the vent, or go over, like, hey, what are we going to do in this situation? So then you're doing your best to prepare somebody for that moment that they're released. And then once they're released, uh, it, so I've been not an FTO and an FTO. I I didn't change my mentality when I had a new person when I become an FTO, because it wasn't like, all right, now I'm all of a sudden going to show somebody how to be successful in this job. I took that mentality and said, okay, well, now I want to officially be an FTO. But before I was an FTO, I would always want to help somebody learn the job, because at the end of the day, I might work with them again.
Right.
So so at the you want somebody to flourish, but also, selfishly, as potentially their partner, you also want somebody that you can rely on, that is going to be able to rise to the occasion, act in the moment, even if you're delegating to them, even if you're saying, I need you to do this. Well, do they know how to do this? Right. So there's all those little values that you can get, whether you're an FTO or not, in showing somebody how to be another member of your society in EMS in your division.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Because it's like you said, it's different. I mean, every place is different. When I worked private ambulance, it was way different of a culture and a process and what your responsibilities were compared
Yeah.
to. I mean, your patient care is one thing, but and I kind of liken the FTO to also to just be that person that helps the new person adopt the philosophies and the ways of the new department that they're in. And
Yeah.
that person may love it or hate it, but ultimately you still want that consistency. So if you don't have an FTO program and you're listening to this, I mean, start looking into how you can develop one, because I think it's important, because this industry is going to rely on the old the old bugs like Rob and I to pass on things to the younger
Right.
generation and make sure that we're leaving it. That's what we all want to do. We want to leave it better than we found it, and that's part of having an FTO program and it being a solid one, and maybe even eventually having someone in charge of it who is overseeing it and developing it and critiquing it. I know that that's what we've been through recently in the last 5 years or so. We have someone that's fully in charge of the FTO, and there used to be, but it wasn't an actual like a job title. It was just someone's responsibility as a captain or something. And now it's actually someone's job title. So I very important position in the EMS world is that FTO, that field training officer, and I'm glad we were able to talk about it today. Like I said, I don't have as
Yeah.
much experience of it as you do, but I think that that's still important to know what the FTOs do. Even just recently, our FTOs are part of our education retreat that we have every year. They come in and they're part of it, so they can so they understand the bigger umbrella of what training our departments are going to be like and what to expect as they go through with new employees. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think having somebody that is solely in charge of overseeing FTO
yeah,
with no other duties, like
right.
you're right, that can be assigned to somebody, but if it depends on how serious you want to take it. Do you have that person who is responsible for overseeing them and then reporting to whoever is the next person that would make decisions regarding that? And you also have to take into account where you're hiring from, where you're at, like, what type of, budget you have,
Mm,
what your department numbers are, that kind of a thing. Like,
sure,
can you afford it? Is it
sure,
justifiable? Like, there's
right,
all those little crazy things that come into account with management.
right,
But at the end of the day, the optimal goal would have somebody just overseeing everything.
right.
FTO, somebody overseeing education, somebody overseeing these kind of things. That would be great if in the real world, if you could have that, that'd
If
be
you could have that,
fantastic.
do that,
Yeah.
right. One thing that I wanted to touch base on is you guys have, and I know we do too, but people that come into the system as an EMT, then they
Mhm.
go to P school and they become a paramedic. What is their FTO process? Or if you want to, what do you have experience? I mean, I know what we do. It's not a full blown new FTO because they've already been FTO'd as the new employee, but now they've got this new, this new credentialing.
Mhm.
I know what we do, and we do some form of, like, we basically put them through a national registry, if you will. Like, we put them
Mhm.
through a test, a written and a hands-on test. What do you guys do, or what have you seen in the past that works for those EMTs that graduate into paramedic, but they're already in the system?
So yeah, without obviously giving away, like, like procedures and stuff like
Sure,
that.
sure.
If I were to, I think that having a bridge program is huge. I think that you learn how to write a run report in EMT school, and then maybe for 2 years, your department, whatever, for whatever reasons, you're not writing run reports, and then you become a paramedic, and now you're in charge of writing them. Well, do you revisit that? Do you
Yeah.
reteach that? You know what I mean? And also, like, let's say they came in and they had training in a device, but they can't use that device as an EMT. Well, then how do you do that? Well, then you put them through the same training that they got if they were a paramedic to begin with. So you have to have some sort of bridge. And I'm lucky enough to work for a department that has something like that,
Yeah, same,
because
same.
that's a huge hole in education if you don't, because then you're just handing them the keys
Yeah.
and you're saying, hey, good luck, kid.
Hey, I know
You know,
you've never done an easy IO before or
yeah,
palpated
yeah,
where to take it,
yeah.
and here it's your turn.
Do you
No,
remember
that's
that
the wrong
training you had
spot.
3 years
Yeah.
ago? Yeah, you remember the training you had 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, now you're going to do it
Yeah.
in real
Well,
life,
remember how
in a real
you were trained to
situation. Yeah.
assist me back then, but now you're going to be doing it. No.
Right. So it's important to have that training, that retraining, that bridge gap. And there are things that our department puts you through to become eligible to be a functioning paramedic in whatever. But
Yeah, it's a big deal for us. I mean,
yes, it's a huge deal.
we
Yeah.
recognize them at our awards banquet. When they go from EMT to paramedic, we put out, we basically put out some sort of media announcement. We announce it to all the stations. We try to tell people to congratulate them, that kind of stuff. So because it's a big deal. I mean, I remember when I got my
Yeah.
P card, I was already a respiratory therapist. I got my P card. It was still a big deal. I was like, this is awesome. I mean, this is great. This is so cool that I'm a paramedic now too, right?
Yeah.
Credentialed licensed paramedic, not just an EMT. So it's that whole thing of culture too. That could maybe be a future episode of how that EMS culture is really where, because one of our big things, and this could be a conversation too, is retention and recruitment. If you don't
Yeah.
have the right culture, people don't want to work for you. People don't want to stay, so you've got
Sure.
to, part of being an FTO and doing the right thing for an FTO program is part of the building that culture to make people retain their position here, or wherever they're at, or be recruited. Word gets out. I mean, EMS and fire is a very small world, and people people
It's
know
getting
about. Yeah,
smaller.
yeah,
It's getting
exactly.
smaller.
So
Yeah.
100%. All right,
Yeah.
Rob.
Because
Well, is there anything else you think we need to touch base on? I think we've
no, I think ending on the idea of culture and being responsible for the culture of your division rests solely on those who are given the position to do so. Um, it's super important to take it as a privilege. It is a privilege to become an FTO. It's a privilege for me to be an educator. So you take that with importance, and you understand, okay, well, if I want somebody to be the next line of my department, I want my department to shine on, I need to make sure that I'm instilling the right things that are going to keep them here. Like you said, with retention, money helps. But again, money, people will still leave if the money's good and the arena is shit. Like, you have to make sure that you're going through the all the steps that it takes to create somebody. Again, I always looked at it as, would I want to work with this person in 6 months, in 2 years, in 5 years? You know what I mean? So I would want to instill those things in them to help them get the right step forward, because it's always the beginning of their career that will stick with them as they move through it. So if you're not putting those right things in those first 6 months, what you might be creating is somebody that you'd be like, oh my God, I'm working with them today. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's these things but again, it's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of who you are as that FTO, as that educator, to say, listen, I want this person to be great, because you know what happens when they're great? They're like, who is their FTO? Oh,
Right.
Rob was their FTO. That's a mark, right? That's a notch on the belt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights on that topic. Like I said, you have experience of being an FTO. I have experience of being a preceptor at the hospital level, and I mean, I believe that that all of us should have some form of FTO inside of them to bring in the new people, whether they're seasoned medics or EMTs or brand new green out of school. I think it's an important thing for retention and making sure that people feel accepted in their new role. Of course, we want people to feel accepted, and I think this is a big part of it. So one last thing before we go, just want to remind people that please visit our landing page and do the subscribe button up at the top right. For those of you listening to the podcast only in audio, the show notes will have the link in it, whether that's audio or on YouTube. Up in the top right-hand corner, there's a purple button that says subscribe. Subscribe to that. We're going to probably do something along the lines of releasing our podcast a day early for those subscribers, and maybe some future things that are going to be special down the road. Don't know. Those will just come about when they do. I'm fully confident that we can create a really cool program, maybe a newsletter of some sort, and you never know where it goes. So that's where you go to do that. Like, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you feel is your go-to platform. And we appreciate you tuning in and listening to us two old medics, us two old fogies talk about different topics, and hope to have you come back next week. Listen to previous episodes too, of course. And don't forget to comment. If you are an FTO or someone who's been through the FTO process, or thought that you were into a new hiring process and it didn't sound kind of like what Rob and I described, if you want to have a comment, don't hesitate. Put comments in the YouTube section. We will get to them and we will answer them. If it's something where you feel that we didn't touch base on something when it comes to the FTO process, we will, maybe we'll have you on and go deeper into the FTO process that we may not have touched on. So we always want interaction. We want people to interact with our episodes, with our topics. We're not always going to be the 100% definitive answer on everything. So we just be professional. If you have a difference of opinion, share it in that comment section, and we'll get back to you. So, Rob, thanks again. As always, it's always a pleasure. I'm glad we're recording these long conversations that we've had. Like I said before, the way that this whole EMS In and Out started is Rob and I would have hours of conversation, and we're like, why didn't we record that? So we are now doing it. We are taking those conversations and getting them recorded and putting them out into the ether. So I appreciate you being here with me and sharing the knowledge that you do have.
Absolutely. Much love to our FTOs. Please be safe out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to EMS In and Out. 2 systems, 1 profession, real conversations. If this episode challenged your thinking, share it with someone on your shift. And remember, keep learning, keep questioning, and always follow your local protocols and medical direction. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell so you'll be notified anytime new episodes drop. And as always, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next call.